Welcome back, everybody, to a new episode of the Hemmings Hot Rod BBQ podcast. My name is Mike Musto, and I am here with Mike Austin and Rob Einaudi, both from Hemmings, to talk about a subject that is somewhat dear to all of our hearts, and it is somewhat dear. Today, we're talking about the Great American Land Yacht. Now, for those who are unaware of what the Great American Land Yacht is, let's just say it's cars built from let's say the mid 1960s all the way up to say 1996. And we're talking about the massive Luxo barges that America built that were literally just meant to cruise America's interstates and highways. These cars were anywhere between 17 and 21 feet long. Most people at some point in their lives had one if you grew up between 1950 and, somewhere in the 90s. They are my personal favorites. I absolutely adore them. I know Rob's had a few, Mike's had a few. So yeah, let's get into it. So what do you guys think about the Land Yacht? Mike?
Well, before we start, I just want to establish that everyone, if you're not familiar with these cars, and when I think of Land Yacht, I think of 70s, like Malays with the huge hoods. But before we get into that, they literally are Land Yachts. We had an Eldorado that we used as a find of the day, like an Eldorado coupe. Maybe it was a coupe de ville. Anyway, one of the big Cadillac coupes.
Yeah.
And it was literally like 3 inches shorter than a Suburban. And it's 2 doors and 4 seats. Like,
yep.
You see them in pictures or you're browsing them in classifieds. You don't realize these things are huge.
They're huge, but there's one thing though. I was looking up weights. Modern cars are actually as heavy or heavier. Yep. Like the Tesla S weighs the same as the car that was banned from Demolition Turbos, the legendary
Imperial bodies. Oh yeah.
They both weigh in at like 4,800 pounds.
Yeah.
So yeah, but they are very long. That's for sure.
Yeah, I think one of the best parts. I think it's hard to like when you talk about the driving experience of an American Land Yacht, right? It's kind of that big, just ultra floaty kind of hitting a bump and porpoising up and down but cruising in complete luxury and just opulence for thousands of miles, getting obviously 12 miles to the gallon.
So, yeah, I mean, that's, I mean,
or 8.
I'll make it about me. There is something in me. I've mentioned this on the podcast a few times. I live in Michigan. Like the good road, like the Car Driver 10 Best Road is like a half an hour drive for me. And that's like the one good road in the area. Like we're not really carving up mountains. And then combine that with getting kind of old. And all of a sudden you're like, what do I want in a car? And then the pandemic, and you're like, I want solace. I want it to be an escape. And the personal luxury car and the luxury yacht like totally embodies that. When at first you're like, why would you get a car this big that only has 2 doors? Or like, what is the point of these? Or, we left them behind. And then you start thinking about it and you're like, no, man, like I do want to drive a living room around. Like I'm leaving my cocoon, my safe cocoon of the house. I want to be in another cocoon,
right?
Except this time with quilted, tufted vinyl, cushy seats.
Pillowtop seats.
Yeah, pillowtop velvet. That's what I was looking for.
Yeah, I mean the car that I learned to drive on, the car that my parents had at the time I was 15. And through high school was a 1977 Coupe de Ville. So like you said, a 2-door coupe, 2-door, massive, column shift auto, leather bench seat. And the car was incredible. And I was just looking it up on Wikipedia because I was like, that was the first year of the 5th generation. So it was actually a brand new body style in 77. It already seemed archaic in 77. Right. Because I was, reading Road and Track and stuff back then. And, like the cool cars were like the 2002s and stuff like that. But boy, that car is comfortable. Incredible car. 6 people, no problem.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's amazing how far they, like when you talk about the big Land Yachts, like when you think of cars from the late 50s and early 60s, right? You think of the size of, say, a 59 Bonneville. Or a 61 Chevy or something like that. These are really big cars. And then you get into the early 70s where Chrysler started going bananas with the C bodies, right?
Completely bananas.
I had a 70 Newport and that I loved. And I remember putting it in my garage and going, it can't be this big.
Yeah.
And I measured the rear quarter panel from the back of where the front door closed to the tail. And the rear quarter panel by itself was 7 feet 2 inches long of straight metal.
Yeah.
And I went, oh my God.
Yeah.
Right. But I remember when I bought it down in Rancho Cucamonga in Southern California and drove it back to San Francisco. And like you said, Rob,
You should never have sold that.
No, it's the dumbest move I ever made. But a massive coupe, total seating for 6, air conditioning, power windows, power seats, like absolute seating for 6. And it just floated down the highway at 75 miles an hour. And I sold it because I bought the worst car in the history of the world, which was an 81 Turbo Trans Am. And I kick myself every time, and I can't find another one. And but so now
they all got crushed.
Well, they got crushed, or to your point earlier, they went in demo derbies and stuff like that. But I mean, the land yacht itself continued on, right? Mike, you were talking about the I think the last American land yachts, quote unquote, that would fit that description would probably be the B-body platforms of Chevrolet, right? The Buick GM, Buick Roadmaster, Oldsmobile Vista Cruiser, Chevy Caprices, right?
Yeah, and then they had the Fleetwood, which ended at the
Fleetwood
96. Same factory. It was a little longer. They called it a D-body. Town car, probably, it went on.
Town car,
probably qualified. Sure. But
barely.
Yeah, the last big caddy coupe was, I think, 92.
Yeah. Yep.
But well, going back though, I was thinking about you're talking about your 70s car. The other thing that happened to them is they're too expensive. If you go back to the 50s and 60s, you had these cars where it was still old school Cadillac, where they're building like, the modern equivalent of $150,000 car or something, or like the fuel injection Pontiac Bonnevilles. It wasn't just the fuel injection in those cars. It was like those things were hand built to a really high standard.
Yeah.
And so you can get those now. And I think that the 70s cars sort of just continued on, at the time, like that was American luxury, which was the luxury standard in the 50s and 60s. That's what everyone else was aspiring to. I mean, you can see there's Mercedes Benzes with tail fins on them because they were like, we got to copy the Americans. And that big, huge, cushy float was a thing. And they kept doing it, even though they had to, styles changed, production changed. They weren't hand building cars anymore as you went through the 70s. And they were still going for that. And it wasn't until probably fuel crisis and downsizing.
I'd say the fuel crisis was the beginning of the end for them.
But they're so, I think when you look at it, and families are families, right? Everybody's got kids and everything else. You look at the market for that. You're like a 21-foot long 2-door coupe, right? Like, and now where everybody is driving around in bubble SUVs that are no longer than 16 feet long. And you're going, what was the mindset behind the development of these cars to make them so massive and just so, like we had a podcast a while ago that we talked about station wagons. And yeah, station wagons were there to an extent, but these were the road going vehicles. I mean, I remember growing up, like my grandfather had a 78 Coupe de Ville, right? And that's what we used to drive around, it big brown Coupe de Ville. It was great. And all of the cars that you used to see on the highway were these, again, big Buick LeSabres and Deuce and a Quarters and things like that. And now we've completely gotten away from them. So, like, what do you think is the biggest? Is there any manufacturer that makes the equivalent of a land yacht right now that you can think of that you would say, that's kind of close?
I mean, it's got to be the Suburban. Or basically, it's the Suburban is the modern equivalent of it, right?
Yeah, the Suburban is the modern equivalent. If you want, like, there's not that many big coupes left, right? Like Benz makes it, Bentley makes it, Rolls makes it.
They don't even make small.
I'll go with Rob. It's the Suburban.
Yeah. It's interesting. I keep looking and I check, almost every night to see what's available, and like there were certain ones that I've always wanted, like the Bill Blass edition Lincolns from the late 70s. I think. They're
all the Lincoln designer ones. All the designer series are amazing now.
I look at them now and I'm like, and the Cartier editions with the small clock and just, again, those pillow top seats and the massive doors that each door was 5 feet long. Having driven them in the past, you I don't know why and I don't know if it's just nostalgia, but I just miss that float. I miss that just kind of porpoise, kind of bouncing down the highway at 70 miles an hour type of thing. And I don't know what's come over me that I'm just so hell bent on getting another one.
It's age.
So this is interesting though, because it is like, yeah, by most modern evaluations, these things drive like garbage, right?
They're terrible. They're awful.
Yeah.
They're good at going in a straight line, and then maybe only not that good. Like my Roadmaster, like you couldn't look to the side, because if you drifted the steering a little bit, you were running over. It wasn't even like they're good in a straight line. It was like they're good over bumps. I mean, but
Right.
I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but I mean, are these things? I guess it's like, is it just that, you know, it's an experience that's so different, or do you actually really like how they ride or drive?
I don't know. I do like how, it's because I do a lot of open road stuff. I do like how they drive. Like I do like, again, I like that kind of floatiness. I like the terrible one finger power steering, right?
Oh,
that
yeah.
you could turn at least a quarter of a turn in each direction and nothing happens. To your point, they are awful, right? The brakes suck. They don't handle worth the hell. And but I do miss that living room ideal, the feeling where you get in. And I think even when you get into a new luxury car of whatever brand it is, you're still so compacted in the cabin because of whatever center console there is, or now you have 27 different screens or whatever, where these old cars would just, it was a cavern of gaudiness, right? With like the plush velvet seats and like the red piping on this, you know, but I can't get over not wanting another one.
It also
so this is my other question. Oh, go ahead, Rob.
No, I was going to say it really separates you from the other cars on the road. I mean, when your hood is that long, and then when the rear bumper is that far away, even if someone's tailgating you, like they're
Right.
still really far away from you. I mean, you are separated from everybody, and it's
That's the old PJ O'Rourke line of, you know, I think he was talking about a Rolls Royce, but with a long hood. A long hood is great because anything bad that's happening is way up there, way away from you, and you don't have to deal with it.
It's true.
It's very
true.
Musto, when did the gaudiness become cool? Like I kind of think about this because I'm into them too, but I don't understand when the switch. Is it a '70s thing? Is it when did the gaudiness switch from horrible to cool?
I think relatively recently, because like if you
the
look
last
at the
10 years.
yeah, I think the last, yeah. I mean, when you look at the stuff that was built in the 70s, it was awful.
Yeah,
right.
people
And
were shaking their heads.
Yeah, I mean, just look at the Pontiac Trans Am and the Bill Blass Edition Continental are like the perfect examples of the worst, right? As cool as like I think they are, it's still awful. It's gold piping and like velour interiors and all. It was just terrible. And I think that now, because stuff has become so streamlined and so kind of buttoned up and stylish and things like that, it all looks the same. Where getting into one of these cars now is like the equivalent of getting into a disco ball. It's just it's so bad. It's amazing.
And I think also, you know, a lot of the classic muscle cars of the 60s and stuff are really ingrained in popular culture. So younger kids are kind of used to them from movies and stuff. But I think like younger folks, when they see one of these land barges, it just looks like, I mean, it looks completely unfamiliar and crazy to them. Unless, you know, unless you grew up watching Streets of San Francisco like I did, you know, you're probably not that familiar. And they haven't continued to exist in popular culture, really.
Right.
You know,
that's a good point. You don't see them where you do see muscle cars, right? In movies and television and stuff like that. The land barge is just, it's not there. They've kind of like you never see like somebody pulling up in like a, I don't know, an old Eldorado or a cat or a Lincoln or a C body. Like that just doesn't ever happen.
I mean, they might be in the background, but we haven't had like the title character driving.
Yeah, the hero or the villain doesn't drive.
I would love that.
Lincoln Mark V.
I would love that. I think if anybody's a movie producer out there, you need to make like a villain show up in like a Bill Blass Continental. I think that would be like something that's just so ostentatious and ridiculous.
They're probably in some old mob movies, maybe here and there, but you know. But
Well,
they're
they
a
are,
little
but
too
I-
big for a good chase scene, right? I mean,
Well, I think the cool part about them is if you watch, this is one of the things I love. I love watching like old 70s movies and stuff like that. Like I recently started going back and watching reruns of like Magnum PI and Simon and Simon and these shows from the 80s. And believe it or not, there are quite a few of them, right? There are quite a few of these big land barges that are in chase scenes because for some reason, bad guys always drove the biggest cars they could, right?
Yeah.
So, if you look at one of the best 80s movies chase scenes, you look at Risky Business, you had a Porsche 928 and like a Cadillac DeVille, which was massive in a chase scene. And you could see how just overly terrible the car was. But I think from today's, and Rob, you made a good point, like kids today, if you show up in one of these cars, they're almost so ridiculous in the way that the interiors are dressed with the two-tone paint and the white wall tires and the just any touch point, you have a combination of cheap and cheaper. It's like a dollar store exploded inside these cars.
I was trying to think of.
Really? I thought they were like earnestly trying. I mean, like they put like a nice plastic quartz clock in them.
Yeah, we had that in the Coupe de Ville, the little clock.
Well, I think they're trying to but when you look at a Mercedes or a BMW from the 70s, right? And how like just the materials were so much better. I mean, leaps and bounds better. But they weren't necessarily luxurious. They were just kind of just better. Where the American cars were, it almost felt like I was walking into a 70s basement that was full of wood paneling, like veneer wood paneling.
Oh yeah.
And like where every countertop in the house was linoleum, right? Because that's kind of what it was. But I still want one. I definitely still want one, and I still want to go. Like I want to bring it to like Pebble Beach, because I think if you pull down like Carmel Valley Road in Pebble Beach in one of these land yachts, I guarantee you would get more snaps, photographs than 90% of the cars down there because they're just not seen.
There are some practical considerations though here, like having fairly recently owned that 72 Chrysler Town and Country 9-passenger wagon, which is the same length as the 70 Fury. That thing was a pain in the ass in Seattle. I got banned from my parking garage in that thing. I'll find the photo. Yeah, I'll find the photo of it sticking out. I rented these 2 spaces in a parking garage for some of my fun cars, and this thing stuck out so far they banned me from the parking garage. So it was tricky, and I remember I owned my 70.
You can't park next to anyone either, right? Because the door is so big.
Right.
Yeah. How do you get out?
Yeah, no, it just doesn't work in certain modern situations. And my 70 Fury convertible that I had in San Francisco, I used to parallel park that thing in Lower Haight. And that was, I had to spend a lot of extra time finding this space that would fit that thing. So there's some practical considerations for these cars.
I mean, it's essentially they're essentially the size of, say, an F-150, right?
Yeah, and you notice those guys are having trouble in some of these modern parking spaces.
Yeah. But I still think
Go
ahead, Mike.
What about the mileage too? Because that's my one reservation with
the mile.
The mileage. They were,
but it would also be pretty tight in my garage. But
they were all powered
by.
I
live with 10 miles per gallon.
They were all powered by massive V8s, right? Like the C bodies were 383s or 440s. The Cadillacs were all 460s and things like that. Just big whatever they were powered by. I don't even know. Or 501s. My old, had an old Eldorado that had a 501 or 500. It wasn't a consideration because gas wasn't $7 a gallon or $6 a gallon like it is now. But I remember my Newport, like driving home from LA at 75 miles an hour, I was pulling 16 miles to the gallon in that thing.
Wow.
And I was like, that's not bad. Because think about it. It was a big block, but it was a 2-barrel with like a 273 or 276 rear gear.
Yeah.
Right. And it had more than enough torque to get the weight moving. The only time that you really sucked the fuel down was when you were going up a hill.
Yeah.
But otherwise it wasn't too bad,
Well, the 16 is not that far off of a lot of trucks now too. So I just look at those
everything.
and I'm like, man, this thing is ripe for an EV conversion. That's what.
Well,
If, if
it's
I had the money for it, I'd be like, yeah, this is.
it's. I think that's a great point because I mean we've talked about doing an EV conversion on a hot rod and stuff like that, and I think that these cars are the perfect platform for EV conversions, right? Because they would never performance cars, but think about how many batteries you could like. I would love like Jonathan Ward from Icon to build me a Chrysler C-body EV.
You got lots of room in the trunk.
Yeah,
for batteries.
And you got this heavy big block, so your net weight.
Yeah,
you're getting a little bit more battery out of the weight exchange.
But I think you're right. I would love to see an EV conversion for a land yacht. I think they're the perfect platform for it.
What's the ultimate one? I mean, I was thinking the one we haven't talked about is the Lincoln Continental with suicide doors. Like I always wanted one of those. I think that is like one of the coolest land yachts ever, personally. And I've never had a Ford product from that era, but I think those are cool. Have either of you guys had one of those or?
No, but I mean, that's like, there's a lot of good designs from that era. And I mean, that's still like pinnacle American design.
It's amazing. Iconic.
Yeah. Well, I think, I mean, like you said, for an EV conversion, I think that's the platform, right? Something like that where you wouldn't really feel bad about driving it. You would have all the style. It would probably handle a lot better. Like I guarantee you if Jonathan, I was watching some of the videos on Jonathan Ward's Icon of the 49 Mercury that he did that was an EV conversion. And I was like, it's perfect because you've got plenty of power. You've got range. You have the style that you want. You've got all the technology. You're not getting 8 miles to the gallon as that thing did originally, but you're getting an honest, 200 miles of range or whatever the case is. But it does make sense as opposed to doing an EV conversion on, say, a classic muscle car, which I'm just not a fan of. But I think if somebody has the money out there, I mean, if I had unlimited funds, I would do one. I'd call up Jonathan Ward and be like, build me a Chrysler C-body EV. That's what I want.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I think that'd be rad.
I wonder how much you gain with like an LS swap too. I mean, you're going to get a few miles per gallon there.
Yeah. You
oh yeah. I mean, there are a lot of LS swaps or conversions out there that have been done. I think that if any type of modern motor conversion, whether it's you do a Coyote or whether you do an LS or it doesn't matter, it's going to be more efficient, right?
I mean, are you losing the character then though? Because like, isn't part of it the idea of, again, my head is stuck in malaise, but isn't part of it like having a 170 horsepower, 500 cubic inch V8?
I guess part of it, in a muscle car, it's just straight terrible. Like my old Trans Am was 190 horsepower out of a 403 big block, and it was terrible. Like, and that's one of the reasons that I got rid of it, because I'm like, the style doesn't match the performance, right? Whereby if you were to put an EV or an LS in that, well, now you've got the performance, right? If the car if the car originally came with some kind of Weezomatic, garbage motor, then swap it. Who cares?
Definitely.
So I don't know. Like I've driven a Roadmaster wagon with an LS swap, and it was amazing.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That makes perfect sense to me. Anyway,
what about the trunk? They have practical storage space too, right? I mean, all that.
Dude, the trunks are massive.
Unreal. Yeah.
The trunks are like, I mean, it's like a small New York City apartment. They're
I mean, so going back to when these were popular, like part of the appeal was like it might not be the primary car, but you could pack the whole family into these things, right?
Absolutely.
Oh yeah.
Trip up to grandma's.
We did a family of 5 all the way across the country in the 77 Coupe de Ville, and totally fine. 3,000-mile trip, no problem.
I mean, think about it, because it's not like SUVs were there. You had the odd kind of Wagoneer out there, but most people used them they were family cars. They towed everything. Right? They towed your boat. Yeah. They towed your camper. They towed this. 4,500 pounds, 6,000, 7,000 pounds. They would tow them. They were all big, full frame, cars. They could do it. Not efficiently, but they would do it. So I think that there's a case for kind of the enthusiast to kind of bring them back. Like I said, I really want another one. I just haven't found it yet. I know Rob you kind of hint every now and then that you want another one. I know you want your 70 Fury back.
I want my convertible Mac. Yeah.
Mike, I don't know if you want one. But
part of me does. The really the probably the top of my land yacht list is, to be totally honest, is a Toyota Century, which is like this like Japanese only limo that they made. And they make like 2 a day or something. But it's just like the super, and it takes a lot of American styling cues from it. But it is that like, it is a sedan, but it's just that big, blocky, Continental-esque, like stately car. But it's also, it's a little weird because it's right-hand drive and it's from it's from Japan. But that's probably the top of my land yacht list. I would like one. It's so hard. If I had an open spot, it's so hard thinking of like, what would I fill it with?
Well, and it's 2 spots.
It's 2 spots.
That's the problem. The other one that I love, because again is biased, but when I was born, my folks had and I remember it quite well, a 64 Cadillac.
Wow.
Door. And I always thought the 64, right around that 64, very clean, cool design. You still get the fins and stuff, but it's not over the top. So I wouldn't mind one of those if I saw a 64 Cali. I think those are gorgeous.
So what are you shopping for, Musto?
I want a C-body.
He wants to replace the one that he sold.
Yeah, I want a 69 to 71 Chrysler Newport.
Yeah.
That's what I want. No vinyl top. It's a unicorn though, man. And the problem is I've seen a couple of them pop up, but I'm not willing to I will spend the money that I have to spend, but I'm not willing to compromise.
And you tried calling the dude you sold it to and get it back?
I have. He didn't return my call, or the number was whatever. But I want one that's completely done, that needs absolutely nothing, right? Like, because my first question whenever I buy a used car, well, what's broken? And nobody ever says nothing, because everything's always broken, right? So
everything.
I want one that's done. So if anybody's listening, you have a C-body, let me know, as long as everything works. Meaning, does it have air conditioning? Yes. Does it work? Yes. Does it run right? Yes. Does it? That's what I want. I don't know if I'll ever find it. I'm trying. But that's my list. 61 or 69 to 71 Chrysler Newport, big block car, AC, power windows.
So Rob talking about the convertible, that reminds me, if someone was like, get a land yacht or what's on your list, I like the mid late 60s convertibles. Mm-hmm. There's something about like land yacht convertible makes the use case better. I don't know, maybe it's parade car, just like,
no, you're right.
It's a sunny day, you're not getting anywhere. But the Buick Electra 225, there's something about it where I'm just like, this thing is, I think it's because it's a little underappreciated, like the Impala and the Cadillacs get all the attention. Mm-hmm. And that Electra is like beautiful design. It's got those like 45-degree fins on it. And I think they're a little underappreciated. They're like, they're more affordable, especially compared to a Cadillac.
Yeah, I totally agree. Well, back in the day, man, I just miss them. So anyway, for those listening, if you have a good land yacht story, and I have a feeling that many of you do, write it in the comments. Very curious to hear what your favorite land yacht is. More importantly, why you like it, what you did with it, and what your opinion on them is now. Would you buy another one? What do you think the pros and the cons are and things like that? So please write them in the comments. As always, Rob and Mike, thank you for coming on. And if you're looking for your particular land yacht, obviously go to Hemmings Auctions. They're there every now and again, and our classified section, of which there are 25 to 30,000 cars at any given time. So this was a little bit of a shorter podcast, but I don't know. I needed to scratch the land yacht itch, which I think we just did. So that'll be dead and buried now, unless you have one that you want to sell to me. Otherwise, that's it, guys. So thanks for coming on, and we'll see you next time on the Hemmings Hot Rod BBQ. Thanks for listening, folks. And again, please subscribe to the Hot Rod BBQ podcast. If you're on Spotify, check us out there. Subscribe to it on iTunes. And if you are going to go to YouTube, make sure you go to the Hot Rod BBQ podcast and hit that subscribe button, and we'll come to you every week.